When she knocked at 3 in the morning, I was already awake. That detail felt meaningless at the time. By the following afternoon, it would feel like the most important thing I could tell you about that night, that I was already awake. That the hour was not the interruption. That something in me had been waiting in the particular way you only ever recognize looking backward. The knock was soft. More apology than alarm. And when I opened the door, Clara Voss was standing in my hallway in a gray sleep shirt and bare feet, holding a worn paperback against her chest with both hands, and she looked up at me and said, "I know, it's late. But you're all I could think of." She didn't mean it the way I needed her to mean it. That's what I told myself, standing in the doorway at 3 in the morning, while I stepped back and let her in. I was wrong about that. My name is Owen Marsh. I'm 34. I manage construction projects for a mid-sized firm in the city, which means I spend my professional life assessing what is structurally sound and what isn't, a skill I have apparently never once applied to my own decisions. I live in apartment 4C of a 6-story building in the kind of neighborhood that used to be something and is slowly becoming something else again. Good bones, the letting agent had told me. Questionable plumbing, I discovered independently. I've been there for just over 2 years. I own a good couch, a coffee machine I take seriously, and a toolkit that makes me feel like a man who has the situation under control. I cook when I remember to. I run in the mornings. I am, on the whole, a person who keeps to himself. Clara Voss moved into 4D 14 days after I moved into 4C. She was a graphic designer, the kind who worked from home, which I knew because I could occasionally hear her through the shared wall. Not words, just rhythm. The specific, sharp cadence of someone having a strong opinion at a screen. She had dark hair she wore differently almost every day, as if she was perpetually mid-decision on the subject. She had one prop she carried everywhere, without exception, a worn paperback. Its spine cracked. Its cover bent at the corner from months of being held in the same grip. I'd seen it in the hallway, in the elevator, once abandoned on the lobby windowsill while she checked her post. I had never asked about it. We met when her smoke detector started beeping on a flat Tuesday afternoon in the specific, relentless way of a battery dying at an inconvenient time. She appeared at my door, holding a 9-volt battery, and a look that made clear she was aware she was about to ask a man for help and had already formed her feelings on the matter. I changed the battery. She said thank you with the energy of someone submitting a formal complaint. I liked her immediately. That should have been information. I filed it under nothing. I was very practiced at that. On the night she knocked at 3 a.m., October had arrived that week with the formal authority of a season that is not asking permission. The hallway outside smelled the way old apartment buildings smell in the first real cold, concrete and radiator heat, and something faintly metallic, like the pipes were announcing themselves. I heard the water before I heard the knock. A low, persistent sound, the sound of something that had held for a long time and had quietly decided it was no longer interested in doing so. Then the knock, soft, as I said, the kind that knows it has no right to be loud. She was in the doorway in the gray sleep shirt and one sock. I noted this and made no comment. Some details you bank until the emergency has been dealt with. My bathroom ceiling came down, she said. About a third of it. Water's coming through from upstairs. Are you hurt? No, she looked down at her one bare foot. Just wet, and confused about how I got here. I leaned past her. Her door was still open. I could hear the leak from where I stood, steady, committed, not interested in negotiation. Come in, I said. She held still for exactly 1 second. The paperback was pressed flat against her chest. Then she stepped inside, I called the building's emergency maintenance line while she stood in my kitchen. With each step, her bare foot left a small, damp print on the tile. There, then fading. Maintenance could send someone. In the morning. Not ideal, I said. Standard procedure, they said. I offered several observations after that, which were factually accurate and professionally inadvisable. She had settled on my couch by the time I hung up. The paperback was on the cushion beside her. She was looking at it the way you look at something, when what you are actually doing is not looking at the room. Morning, I said. Morning, she said. They're coming at 6. She nodded in the way of someone who had expected this. Take the bedroom, I said. I'll be fine out here. Owen, she looked at me steadily. I knocked on your door at 3 in the morning. I don't get to be a guest. I am an emergency. She said it the way she said most things. Dry, efficient, with just enough warmth behind it that it never landed the wrong way. I found the spare blanket from the hall cupboard. Dark green, soft in the way of something that has been through many winters and asked nothing in return. She wrapped it around her shoulders without ceremony, reached for the paperback, and settled back against the cushions. I noticed she wasn't reading it. She was holding it. Something about that sat wrong with me in a way I did not examine. I made tea. Not because I particularly drink tea, but because it was 3 in the morning and I needed to do something with my hands that was not standing there looking at her on my couch in the green blanket, which seemed like a thing a person should not do for extended periods. She took the mug in both hands. They were cold. I noticed that also. You didn't have to stay up, she said. Maintenance isn't until 6. I wasn't going to sleep. You could have. I know. She looked at me over the rim of the mug. Something moved through her face. Fast, unreadable, gone before I could be sure I'd seen it correctly. We sat in the particular quiet of a building at 3 in the morning, which is not silence so much as the sound of a building's private life. The tick of the radiator, the elevator running somewhere below us, the faint creak of pipes adjusting to decisions they'd made earlier. She opened the paperback after a while. I looked at my phone. Neither of us was doing the thing we appeared to be doing. She fell asleep around 4. I could tell by the way her shoulders changed, a small, involuntary release, like setting something down. The paperback slipped slightly in her grip, but she kept one hand on it. I sat in the chair across the room and watched her for 30 seconds, which is approximately 25 seconds longer than was strictly called for. Then returned my attention to my phone and made a deliberate choice not to investigate what I was doing. I have poor survival instincts in rooms that are too quiet and too honest. The paperback's cover had turned visible in the low light from the window. I had seen her carry it for the better part of a year without ever reading the title. I read it now. It was a love story. Of course it was. I looked at the ceiling for a measured amount of time and decided, actively, not to think about what that meant. Dan from maintenance arrived at 6 exactly. A large, efficient man who smelled of early coffee and pragmatic resignation and had the pipe sorted in 38 minutes with the focused calm of a professional who has seen worse things before sunrise. He told Clara the plaster ceiling would need attention in a few days, that the bathroom itself was usable, that she should run the extractor fan. He didn't editorialize. He left. Clara stood in my kitchen, still wrapped in the green blanket, the paperback back in her hand, looking at no particular thing. I should go check the damage, she said. Probably she didn't move. Or, I said, I could make eggs. Since we're both awake at 6:30 on a Saturday through no fault of our own. She sat down, not quickly. The way you sit down when you've been deciding not to, and you finally run out of argument. I don't know the exact moment I started paying attention to Clara Voss in the way that was going to become my problem. The honest answer is somewhere around month 3. She knocked on my door to tell me the parking restrictions outside had changed, and my truck would be towed if I left it where it was. She delivered this information with the efficiency of someone completing an errand. Then she turned to go. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Obviously," and kept walking. And the obviously stayed with me, the implied ease of it, the "of course you'd want to know." And I filed it under nothing and went to move my truck. There was the elevator, 3 months before the night of the pipe. She'd gotten on at the lobby with 4 canvas bags and the paperback somehow still in her grip. Midway up, she'd read aloud, not to me, not quite to herself, just one sentence, offered to the air of a moving elevator he already knew. He was just waiting to see if she'd let him. Then the doors opened on our floor. She walked to 4D and closed the door. I stood in the hallway with those 17 words occupying the exact space where the rest of my thoughts had been. I filed them. And then there was Petra from 3B. Petra had been in the building for 7 years and treated this as a form of institutional knowledge. She caught me in the lobby 2 weeks before the pipe incident with the specific, purposeful energy of a woman who has decided to be useful. "I spoke to your neighbor," she said. "Which one?" "Clara. She was asking about you." I kept my face neutral. I manage construction sites for a living. Neutral is a professional skill. What was she asking? "Whether you'd been here long." Petra tilted her head. "Whether you were seeing anyone." I said nothing. "I told her the truth," Petra said pleasantly, "that you worked too much and could use someone to bother you about it." She walked away with the satisfied air of someone who had completed their task. I stood in the lobby and stared at the elevator doors for approximately 3 minutes. Then I filed it. Filed it with the obvious, with the 17 words, with the immediate and unreasonable interest in a woman who said thank you like a formal grievance. Filed all of it under nothing. By that point, I had an extensive filing system and absolutely nothing to show for any of it. We ate scrambled eggs at my kitchen table at 7:15 on a Saturday morning. She was still in the green blanket. The city outside had begun its unhurried start to the day. "The book," I said, after a while. She looked up. "What about it? Is it good?" She considered the question the way she considered most things, with more seriousness than it probably warranted, and more honesty than I'd been expecting. "It's frustrating." "Why?" "Because the man takes 300 pages to say the one thing, and you can see him not saying it on every single page. You want to shake him." She turned her fork over on the plate. "But you also understand him, which makes it worse. Because he's not oblivious. He thinks the cost of being wrong is higher than the cost of saying nothing." She said it plainly. Then she seemed to hear the shape of what she'd said, and she looked at her plate, and her fingers tightened once around the fork. "Sounds like a miscalculation," I said. She looked up. "Is it?" I didn't answer. She looked back at her plate. After breakfast, she folded the green blanket. Carefully. More carefully than the situation required. Into thirds, then placed on the arm of the couch. She picked up the paperback. She stood in the middle of my living room and looked at the front door. "Owen," she said. "Yeah." She turned around. She had the expression of someone who has made a decision they are not going to revise. Her voice was very quiet, not hesitant. Quiet. When the ceiling came down, she said. I stood in the hallway. I looked at the emergency number. I thought about calling a hotel. I thought about my parents. A pause. And then I looked at your door. And that was the answer. before I'd had time to think about it. She heard herself. "I know that's probably more than you needed to, Clara." She stopped. I should have said nothing. That would have been the sensible choice. We had a working arrangement. I changed her smoke detector batteries. She knocked on my wall on the mornings my alarm ran late, which she had never acknowledged doing, and I had never acknowledged noticing. We occupied adjacent spaces with the specific warmth of two people who had both been around enough to know what they were doing. I should have nodded, said, "I'm glad you came over." Let her walk back to 4D and her damp wall and her Saturday. Instead, I said, "You know what you said when I opened the door." She went still, not dramatically, just still. "You're all I could think of." I paused. "I've been thinking about that since 3 a.m. It's now." I looked at the clock on the wall. 7:42. "Owen, I know what the sensible call is here. I've been making the sensible call for about 18 months. I changed your battery. I held the elevator. I filed. I stopped. Started again. I noticed things, and I decided that noticing them was not the same as what it actually was. Which was, she was looking at me. "If you want to walk out that door," I said, "walk out. Nothing changes. Not one thing. You can knock on that door at 3 in the morning for the next 10 years and I will answer it the exact same way." She didn't move. She stood in the middle of my living room holding the paperback, and she didn't move. And something in her face was doing the thing her face did when she'd run out of the safer version. 3 months ago, she said. Her voice was low. "You held the elevator. I was coming up from the car park with 4 bags of groceries. You'd already passed your floor. You saw me on the camera in the lobby and you came back down and held it. I remembered. I watched you do that," she said, and I thought. She stopped. Her jaw was set in the way of someone choosing their words from a very short list, I thought. That's the person. That's what that looks like. She said the last sentence quickly, like it had been sitting behind her teeth for months, patient and waiting, and had finally simply run out of room. Something in my chest moved, not dramatically, just enough that I noticed it. "Clara, don't be careful about it," she said. "Just, I'm not being careful about it." I crossed the kitchen. I was in front of her before I'd fully decided to move. When Petra told me you'd been asking about me, I stood in the lobby for 3 minutes, not moving, just standing there, thinking about what it would mean if I let it mean something. I looked at her. Every time something went wrong this year, you were who I wanted to tell. Every time something was good. And I kept not, because I told myself the arrangement was easier, she said. Yeah, that's the exact word I used. She looked at me steadily. To myself. Approximately 300 times. I reached over and took the paperback out of her hands. Carefully, she let me. I set it on the counter. She looked up. "Hi," she said. Very quietly. "Hi," I said. I reached up and tucked a piece of hair behind her ear. Just that. Nothing more. Her eyes closed for 1 second, then opened. She was looking at me the way she looked at things when she had stopped pretending she wasn't looking. And then, from the hallway, directly through my front door, came Petra's voice at full volume in the specific tone of a woman having a phone conversation in a public corridor with no awareness that this is a choice. "Yes, Daniel, the pipe is fixed. The whole night. I am telling you. I saw her go in at 3 a.m. and I saw Dan leave at 6, and she is still in there. Yes, right now." I know. Clara laughed. It came out wrong, too sudden, too surprised, and she pressed the back of her hand over her mouth, and her shoulders shook. And I leaned against the counter and waited, and eventually she looked up at me with bright eyes and said, She's not technically incorrect. She is not, I said. Not about any of it. No, I said. Not about any of it. 2 months later, the paperback appeared on my bookshelf. She didn't mention it. I came home one evening to find it sitting between 2 books I'd had for years, and she was in the kitchen making coffee, and she glanced over her shoulder at me with the expression of someone who has made a decision and is not accepting questions on the subject. I didn't ask any. A year after that, we had dinner at her parents' house, a long table in a small kitchen full of the smell of something slow in the oven, and the sound of her younger brother making a series of poor decisions at cards. Her mother asked how we met. Clara said, "He fixed my smoke detector," I said. She said thank you, like she was lodging a complaint. Her mother laughed. Her father looked at me in the quiet, considered way of a man who has been paying attention for 12 months and has reached a conclusion. Her brother Daniel said, "I thought you met at 3 in the morning." Clara set down her fork. "We met 18 months before that. But the 3 a.m. thing is when you, Daniel," Clara said. Daniel grinned at his cards and said nothing else. Years later, when people asked how we knew, the real moment, the one that mattered, she would say the elevator. 4 minutes, she would tell them. He'd already passed his floor. She would say it simply, as if the story explained itself, which it did. I would say the hallway at 3 in the morning. A woman in bare feet with a paperback pressed to her chest. She looked at me and told me the truth before she decided to. The way the real things always arrive, not with announcement, just with sudden, quiet certainty. We were both right. That's the thing about 2 people who have been carrying the same weight without knowing it. You don't fall. You just both, finally, put it down. What would you have done if your neighbor knocked at 3 in the morning and told you that you were all they could think of? And have you ever been someone's first call, without knowing what it meant, until you did? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one got you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.